Hey folks, Dr. Mike Israel here for Renaissance Periodization Nutrition Myths Series, video number 5, The Best Diet. Juicy. Let's get into it. We're going to talk about the claim that there is such a thing as best diet, what exactly the claim is, why it's wrong, what grains of truth there might be to something like that, and then of course best practices so you actually learn something instead of just hear me talk smack. So, the claim of the best diet is that there is one optimal diet for everyone. And it's usually very specific, and it's going to hack your body for the best possible results. Of course, you'll need to buy my New York Times bestseller book to really learn about the diet. It's $19.99, but come on now, we're all pretty wealthy by historical standards. Here's the thing though, big pharma, big business, big beef is going to try to stop you from learning the truth. So be a brave warrior of this new world and buy my book, because they're the secret diet, magic diet, the serendipitous diet, the synergistic diet that makes you whole. It cures all the diseases. It makes you lean and jacked and adds body fat if you want. It does everything great. All you need to do is buy my book. This stuff happens all the damn time. Watch random episodes of Dr. Oz or Oprah, and there's another motherfucker on there with that diet book that's hacking everything, right? And it can sure seem appealing because look, a lot of you guys that watch this channel, you're hardcore fitness folks, you already know it's bullshit. Here's the thing, we all started somewhere. And regular people that need an answer to like, how the hell do I eat so I'm healthier and leaner, etc., and look better, when someone says, especially someone PhD after their name or MD, doctor this, person that, elite athlete, when they say like, look, I've got the blueprint for this ultimate diet, that's tempting. You're like, holy shit, but here's the answer. Right? Like if Bill Gates says like, hey, I've got this amazing computer program that'll help you organize all your files, you're not like, bullshit, it's a scam. Like, you're like, yeah, that's great. Like Microsoft Windows, it's amazing. Right? It's given us like a, second renaissance of civilization. Awesome. But in the diet world, sometimes there are good solutions. Sometimes there aren't. And a lot of times it's BS, but it's really, really tempting BS. So why is this wrong? Couldn't there be an optimal diet for everyone? Well, here's the thing, diets depend on fundamental principles like calorie balance, nutrient allocation, macro ratios, so on and so forth. And these principles can be applied in a very wide effective range. People say, how much protein do I need? Well, it depends on who you are. And even if you're a competitive bodybuilder, there's a pretty big range there. That's okay. There's a low end and a high end and a lot of room in between. So if someone says I have a perfect diet to eat this much protein, automatically they're missing a lot of nuance in which you're like, well, what if I eat 90% of that? I'm like, that's actually totally cool. What if you eat 110%? That's totally fine too. And then all of a sudden, like, so there is no perfect diet. There's a range of principles that as they intersect, there's a really big Venn diagram circle in the middle that includes all the good stuff about dieting. And turns out there's a lot of right answers. And that's really the reality, right? In addition to that, that's just general. Depending on situations, diets can alter significantly, and then in that local area of application can become the best or better diets, but they're not universally better, right? Like you guys know from maybe playing like shoot 'em video games or whatever, like you could say, what's the best gun in this video game to use? Is it the sniper rifle? Is it the grenade launcher? Or is it like the knife? Like, well, if you're in a super dark hallway and it's super cramped, like the knife is better than either one of those two. Because if you shoot off the grenade launcher, you just blow up, and the sniper rifle, you can't aim. From 1,000 feet on a perch, the sniper rifle is the best. And when you have like tanks and crazy zombies coming at you and they're 50 feet away, the grenade launcher. So it's not actually an answer to the question of what's the best gun in the video game. But like if someone who doesn't play video games sits down with you and you're a super gamer and they're like, what's the best gun? And you're like, it depends on where you are. Just the same way with dieting, for example. Individuals. Okay, some people are involved in different activities. Some people are different sizes, different shapes, different food tolerances. Depending on the individual, dietary recommendations can absolutely change. So if you write that stupid New York Times bestseller book of like, this is the exact diet, some of that shit's just not going to be right depending on who you are, right? Imagine describing the best diet for Ronnie Coleman and you're a 120-pound, 45-year-old housewife reading it. You're like, oh, interesting, 400 grams of protein a day, on it. And all of a sudden you're like, what the hell am I doing, right? Different needs at different times, right? Like the best massing diet is not the best cutting diet. They can't both possibly be the same best diet because one of them is radically different calories than another. Special situations, like if you have celiac disease or something like that, if you're allergic to a bunch of stuff, you can't possibly eat this diet that people say is amazing, right? And magnitude of goals. Like the best diet for someone with aspirations to become world's strongest man, except they weigh 270 pounds, is the diet that takes them sort of more or less on a wiggling path to 400. Right? But that's not the best diet for an endurance athlete that weighs 170 and needs to weigh 145, right? So all of a sudden, all the stuff with different situations goes out the window and there is no real best diet. In addition, and this is a really, really big point, adherence is massive. In the real world, there is the hypothetical of what a best diet could supply you, nutrients-wise, timing-wise, if you did it, and to the extent that you did it. And then that real world also has the consideration of to what extent will you do it? Okay, so if I give you the world's fastest car, but it requires a race car driver's ability to understand how to actually use well, you're better off with like a Ford Mustang or something that you're like, oh, I stick shift and I actually know how to do this. And you can actually go 120 in that car. Versus if I give you a super exotic race car, you go up to 140 and you're like, holy shit. And you just crash the thing because you have no idea how to operate it, right? So adherence, the ability to stick to something and actually use it, varies. And some people do better with some kinds of diets than others. Some people adhere better to high carbs. Some do better with low carbs. Some 2 meals a day. Some 6 meals a day. Some people love to eat diets with lots of raw fruits and veggies, and some people it just doesn't go down. They look at a piece of broccoli and they're like, crap, can I saute this because I'm not eating it? If the optimal diet causes you poor adherence, it's no longer the optimal diet in real life. So you can't really tell someone like, oh, this is the right diet, but if you're not going to do it, then it's not going to work. Yeah, sure, that goes as far as it does. It doesn't go far enough. A real optimal diet takes into account what is possible, what is able, right? Like if aliens give us a gift of optimal technology from their own society, and it's this Rubik's Cube bullshit that we can't figure out, well, aliens aren't that smart, because optimal would be like to actually improve our society. Now, if it was a Rubik's Cube shit that came up and had an easy menu of like improve society, reduce crime, that would be sweet, but it actually has to be usable. So anytime you give someone diet advice and you think you know the optimal diet, make sure you figure out what is probably going to be something they do. And then the optimal turns into the realistic and turns to actually affecting them in a beneficial way versus just like, well, if you could do it, it would be amazing, right? Now, there are grains of truth to where this idea comes from. There are definitely extremes of dieting, which probably suck, or at the very least suboptimal for almost everyone. For example, ultra low carb forever is needlessly restrictive. It causes cravings. It screws up your social life. It's probably not a good idea to do for almost everyone. There are exceptions to these. And if you want to comment on YouTube that you're an exception, go to town. But remember, exceptions are fine. For most people, ultra low carb is stupid. Carnivore diet, it just seems like randomly taking food groups out for no reason. Probably not a great idea for most people. Insufficient diets with insufficient protein or micronutrients or something like that. So if you're a fruitarian, you only eat fruit and you're taking in 10 grams of protein a day, bad news. But there's not really a universe in which that diet is a good idea for anyone in the long term. And then other weird dietary things like eating 10 times a day. Like some diets are like, you got to eat every 2 hours. Like, but you don't actually got to eat every 2 hours. It's really more like a real high pressure situation of a competitive bodybuilder, maybe every 4. Or you could make an argument that 4 is better than 5 in that situation. And then there are some caveats there that maybe even that's too extreme. But if someone tells you like you have to eat 10 times a day, really small portions, they're just wasting your time, right? So there's diet extremes, which are no good, which means that when you tell someone, here's the optimal diet, if your optimal diet is general enough, it just exists in that universe of things that are all pretty good ideas. And outside of that, there are definitely distinct bad ideas, right? And staying away from these extremes probably gives a lot of the best diets a lot of common ground. For example, most of the best diets, or the ones that work well in real populations, have plenty of whole foods. Because whole foods are super healthy, they're super great, they just have all these pluses and very few minuses. Lots of veggies, fruits, grains, lean proteins. Most of the diets that work really well are built core into those, at least some of those, and very not so many foods outside of that realm. Diets emphasize healthy fats, okay? They're really, really good, and a lot of the best diets have healthy fats emphasized. Moderate meal timing, which is to say not like 1 meal a day, which most people can't sustain, and not like 10 meals a day, which most people can't sustain, but like, a diet that has 2 to 5 meals per day for most people is something they're going to be able to do, maybe even 2 to 4. And diets with similar daily meal patterns. So basically, like, it's not like one day you eat once at 2 p.m. and the next day you eat 10 times and the other day you just randomly eat, and if it's your macros. Usually diets which have a distinct, like, hey, in the morning you wake up and after X amount of time you generally eat, and you generally eat a lunch and then a dinner and then a late night snack. The human body loves consistency, especially with food and sleep. So diets that are regular are usually better than not. So if you have this sort of universe of good dieting, most of these practices float in there. And there are diets in there without these practices, but they're few and far between. So when we say there's no such thing as the optimal diet, that's totally true. But there is such a thing as a better diet and a worse diet. And a lot of the better diets tend to look pretty similar. So just the same way as you could say, well, there's no such thing as the optimal NFL football player, because different positions and stuff like that, different physiques. That's true. But if you're like, and no offense, and by the way, I'm really short. If you're like 5'1" and 120 pounds, you're not really in that universe of, though diverse, of good football player. Okay. And if you're like 7'3" and 130 pounds, you're definitely not in that universe. You're just going to get broken in half. So while it's not true to say there is an optimal football player physique, there is a distinct range of physiques which are really good at football. And there's definitely some outsides there that just probably aren't that good. Right. So what do we do with all this? How do we take all this and actually put it into practice? When you're choosing your own diet, it can be an exploratory process over a period of time of choosing diets with those good diet features that we talked about earlier. So from the grains of truth, like diets that are higher in protein, lots of healthy fats, lots of unprocessed ingredients. You can pick and choose and make your own diet from those good inclusion points. And all of a sudden you have a really, really good thing going, right? So yeah, you should be focusing on the grains of truth that are kind of more or less universal for all diets. Hell, shameless plug. You can even try the RP Diet. We have the RP Diet Coach app, or you can read the book and make your own diet. It's totally cool. Now, I need money, folks. I need to buy a Lamborghini. My old Lamborghini is just like, who has a 1990s Lambo anymore? I live in Vegas. I got to have the finest. Pay me money. But on a serious note, totally kidding. Only if you like, you can check out the app. It's not magic. Other diets work super great. Give it a shot. If not, no big deal. And here's the deal. App, no app, whatever. Always keep an open mind. Focus on principles of dieting. Like, am I meeting my macros? Is my calorie balance good? Am I fundamentally eating healthy foods? Versus names and exactitudes. Be like, well, this zany, crazy diet that just came out and Dr. What's-his-name says it's great and has exactly this ratio of foods. That kind of stuff stay away from, because that's almost certainly bullshit. Folks, thanks for tuning in. See you next time.